Good morning, everyone. My name is Sugars from Olympus UK, and today I'm here to give you best practice on macro photography on the Olympus cameras. If you could just mute your screen, that would be lovely. And then when you've got a question, you can just unmute and chip in. No questions are silly questions, so if you want to get involved, please just chip in at any point. So today we're going to be covering the macro and how to get the best out of it. We have two current options within our lens range. We have the 30mm and we have the rather lovely 60mm. Both of these lenses, fantastic little lenses, and both will do most of what we're talking about today. But I'm going to be using the 60mm on an EM1 Mark III. But again, body-wise, most of this will apply to pretty much most of the top-end cameras. If it doesn't, I can gladly walk you through your camera with a one-to-one separately at some other point. All we have to do is book a session afterwards, which would be no problem at all. Okay, so let's make a beginning today. So the 60mm is obviously a 120, so it gives you a lovely bit of distance between you and your subject matter. It's 13 elements in groups of 10, and it's a 2.8 lens. It actually makes a really nice portrait lens as well as a macro lens. So there's quite a few options available for this lens. And if you're heading out for the day with your OMD and let's say a 12-100, there's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't have maybe a 60mm, which fits in the palm of your hand, or a 30mm with you, purely because they will give you such a different aesthetic than your standard lenses, and it really does open up to more creativity, especially when wandering around in the woods. We're reaching that time of year where the mushrooms are starting to pop out the ground, so again, to have a 60 with you is a nice option, particularly if you want to do a bit of stacking. So today I'm going to walk you through best practice on how to shoot the 60mm. So this is the way I like to shoot it. Obviously, just follow me today. And if you want to tweak it yourself, then you're more than welcome. We'll then walk through high res and we'll then walk through stacking. I have a little demonstration behind me using a little light source that, oh, 1 second, I just need to admit somebody. Hello, Pam, you haven't missed much. But just to let you know, I'm recording this, so you'll all have a copy afterwards. Where was I? So yeah, I'm going to walk you through 3 different setups, and then we'll do a little Q&A at the end and see how we all get on. Okay, before we go anywhere, let's talk about the lever, because I think that's probably the #1 issue most customers have when they've bought the 60. So let's just talk about that before we go anywhere. The way I remember this is when I push the lever direction towards myself, it's in portrait mode. It's going to be 1/2 meter to infinity. So, or 1/20th of a meter, depending on which variant you've got it on. Basically, it's not your macro settings. It is general shooting and portrait. When it's flicked back, you then flick it forward and you're then into your macro settings, which is between 1/20th of a meter and 1/2 meter. And then when you click it forward, you then go into 1-to-1 where it moves an element, and then it will take you as close as you can physically go. And again, I'm going to cover all of this in a little demonstration just after the PowerPoint. Okay, so let's go over to the PowerPoint, and I'm just going to start sharing my screen now. So give me 1 minute. Okay. Just give it a moment to kick in. It's always a bit slow at this time in the morning. There we go. Oh, let's get back to the start. Sorry about that. And I'm just going to get rid of me for the moment, so it's not too distracting. Okay, so back in the good old days before COVID-19, you would have come and seen me in Park Cameras or one of my lovely little LCEs on my patch, or possibly Wex over in Bristol, and I'd have had a table of stuff all set out for you guys to try out the macro, to try out the stacking, to try out a few of the flash units, etc. But obviously, in the current situation, we're unable to do that. But us at Olympus have been offering you these online workshops to try and give you some best practice, best we can. So I haven't got quite the luxury setup that you see in front of you today. I've got a few of my favorite objects that I've collected over the years that make really nice kind of macro examples. So I'm going to use that for my example today. Okay, so standard 60mm. Or if you could just mute your microphone, well, that'd be lovely. Great. Yeah, if you could just mute your microphone. Brilliant. Okay, standard 60mm shooting. So this is your standard kind of macro shot. It's not one-to-one, it's filling the frame, it's nice and close to the flower. I've done a few of the classic kind of techniques that we like to use for things like this. I've added what I would call sort of not unnecessary details, but little bits to draw the eye in. Things like the little seed pods from a dandelion are there. I also am a big fan of squirting water onto things. Just give it a little squirt and suddenly you've got a little bit more light moving around and a little bit more texture, and it works really nicely for that sort of thing. Then I'm going to show you how to do one-to-one. So you can obviously see between there and there, there's quite a different aesthetic. And when you go one-to-one, the world becomes quite abstract and you start playing in a completely different realm where you're thinking about colors and how they sit next to each other. Very much the rule of thirds comes into play at this point. You start thinking more in a graphic kind of term, in my opinion. And then obviously with this type of shot, it'd be nice to then have some sort of insect involved. With macro photography, you will need some patience. It is very hard work. Okay, I'm going to show you guys a bit of high res. This one is taken from my high res video that is online currently that you can view at the Olympus Image Space. I've got a similar setup today. I've added a few bits just to make it a bit different and a bit more interesting. So again, we're going to cover that. So this is the whole shot. And then when you crop in, you can see that you can get so much resolution using the high res mode. And on the EM1 Mark III, this is all handheld and on the X. On your EM1 Mark IIs, you can do this and the ones, but you would need a monopod or a tripod to assist you with this. Stacking. So stacking is a wonderful feature, and in our cameras you can do it all in the body, and it will do 15 frames on the top end cameras and it will do 9 frames on the mid-range 5. So again, both those options will give you a really nice stacked image. If this was just shot with the one shot, the little leafy bits just on the right hand side would be the only subject matter in focus. So everything on that far left hand side would be completely out of focus, sadly. But with the in-camera stacking at its maximum, which is 15 like this one, you can go the whole way across the sort of head of the flower and get a far greater level of detail. And again, imagine you had that moment where a bee comes in to sort of fertilize or steal some pollen from this flower. It would be a truly wonderful shot. And again, I'm going to show you how to do that as well. So there's the difference. So this is stacked and that's non-stacked. Obviously, I've moved the shot slightly to get more out of the stacking. By putting it at an angle, it's accentuated the stack. But this is how it would look like with just the one shot. And again, really nice different aesthetics from just a couple of different easy movements on the camera. Again, once you know these features, you can really play around and get some wonderful effects out of them. At the end of the day, we're after creating wonderful pictures. And anything that we can do to assist that, we are more than willing to give to you guys. Okay, so all of this can be done out in the wild. A lot of people speak to me and say that can you do this in the wild? Absolutely. I'd highly recommend that you start in your kitchen or somewhere where you've got some nice secondary light bouncing in. In my living room currently today, I've got secondary light bouncing in. My garden faces west, so everything's in the east at the moment, but the light that's bouncing in is truly lovely. When you go out in the wild, you can do up to 15 frames stacked. I would again start at somewhere around 8 or 7 once you're sort of learning how to do it. But this one here I did in the wild. I turned a log over, and again, if it didn't have the full 15 stacks, you wouldn't see the creature in the background. You'd just have the very foreground creature in. This one was actually done using an STF8, which is a flash unit sat on the front. And again, if you want me to run through how to do that, we can book a one-to-one. It involves some manual flashing, etc. But it's a great feature to be able to tweak and play around with your images with. Okay, 0.9 to infinity. So this is when you've got the lever pushed back towards you. This is the closest I could get to these snail shells. And sometimes you do want to get more in than just the close-up. This is obviously somewhere where some birds have been feeding and they've just left the snail shells behind, but it makes quite a nice abstract shot with a bit of flash thrown in. So again, sometimes you will be coming back a bit to get a little bit more in, but it works really nicely. Right. Let's plug in the camera. So give me a moment just to switch to feeds, and I'm going to show you how to do all this. I'm just switching HDMIs from the camera, the webcam that you've seen me from, and I'm now just plugging into the back of my camera. And as I said, I've got the EM1 Mark III here, and I am using a 60mm. So let's just get that plugged in. That looks good. Let's stop sharing this one and jump to the other screen. Brilliant. Okay, so you're now seeing the back of my camera. So let's bring up my super control panel. So you achieve that by pressing OK. And most of my settings that I adjust on a daily basis are all built in this section. This is your kind of easy access menu. Okay, so let's start with how I'd normally do this. Firstly, ISO wise in the top corner, you can adjust this using the dial on the front by your finger, which if you're in manual would be your aperture. If you're in aperture priority, this would be your over and under expose button. So I do most of my adjustments just on the front wheel. So today I haven't had my breakfast yet and we're doing macro, so I'm going to go a little bit fast. I'm going to go somewhere around 800 just so I've got a really nice fast shutter speed for you guys. You've got your white balance here, which I'll often custom set. You can obviously have it completely on auto and it will do a wonderful job. But if you go to the back of this menu, you can also have a custom white balance, which I love playing with. It then becomes the number option down here where you can dial in different color temperatures, which is something well worth playing with. The further up you go this way, the more it looks like a Spanish holiday. And the further down you go, the kind of cooler it looks. It's really designed to compensate for ugly tungsten balanced lighting, etc., like indoor lighting, but you can also use it as a very creative effect. So I'm going to leave it at that at the moment. I've got mine set on vivid. I've got a little bit of a tweak on the contrast. I'm going to give the sharpness a tweak, and I'm also going to give the saturation a bit of a punch just to make it look a little bit more dramatic on your computer screen. The next thing I'll adjust is you want single AF. Some people will use continuous AF. I really struggle with it. I'll have single AF with manual override. Obviously, this lens doesn't have a pullback ring, and a lot of people struggle again to manually focus because it just keeps running through the thing. So what you want to do is have single AF with manual override, and again, I'm going to walk you through that in a mo. Switch that phase detection off, and you want to go into your metering and go into center weighted metering. If you really are a bit of a camera ninja, I would suggest you go for spot metering. That's more accurate. I struggle a bit with it. It's a bit too limiting for me. So I generally go for that, which is kind of center weighted. And traditionally, for nearly everything else, I'll use the whole chip for the metering as well. But there's the odd occasion, particularly the sort of stuff where you're really exposing for the flower that you're on. I'll use 4x3, which is the whole chip, which works perfectly. And I think we're pretty much ready now to move into the main menu and adjust button settings. So what I normally do is I'll go to the very far corner here, click on here, and this will give me all my button functions. This varies from camera to camera, i.e. It won't have the visual display like on the Mark II, but you will be able to run through all your function buttons and they're all labeled on the body, and you can adjust what everything does here. So out the box, this one is an over and under expose. For me, I like a bit of peaking. You can have peaking set so it comes whenever you press manual, but I generally use it all the time. So I put it on a button and press it when I feel I need it. My eyesight isn't what it used to be. So I've basically gone from multifunction to peaking there, which works really nicely. A lot of people change their video button because a lot of people aren't into video. And again, you could put something more useful there if you wanted to. You've got your back button focus button. Back button focus is something I use particularly for wildlife and macro, but you can also adjust what goes onto this button too. Or you could even bring up the AEL/AFL button on another button. So here I can obviously jump to other options, but I could go into here and go and find the back button focus. So this really is a lovely way of being able to customize your camera. So this one here is set for ISO out the box. As you've seen, I generally do that off the super control panel. So I don't really need ISO on my finger, on my thumb here. But what I do like is having my groupings there. Again, for wildlife and things like that, it's a real godsend to be able to go from back button with your thumb to jump over to here, and you can then adjust the grouping. So I've missed my bird or whatever it is, I can then tap that, and again, using the front dial, enlarge my groupings. So all I've done is go through here and just chosen area selector. And as you can see, there's lots of other buttons to set up, including the grips. And when you've got a pro lens, you can also put on something onto that button. Again, a lot of people like to drop magnifier onto there as well, which is quite interesting. One touch white balance and depth of field preview. Again, not overly useful in a digital world because you can take a picture and look at it. So I'll often put a magnifier here, which means I can zoom right in on what I'm doing and just check that everything is tickety-boo and in focus. Right, so that's pretty much that bit set up. I now will press menu and bring up my menu system. Because I've got an HDMI plugged into my camera, quite a few of my options are grayed out. So we'll have to do a bit of PowerPoint and a bit of practical when showing you some of the features. But the next place we're going to move down to would be our cog. And our cog is predominantly where most adjustments are for focusing or continuous AF or frame rates or things like beeps and grids. A is around sort of exposure, B is around buttons, C is continuous, and D is display. So there's sort of a coherence here. So things like in display 4, you definitely probably want to turn off your beep, quite an annoying sound. And again, in D3, something I use a lot is grids. So grid settings, you can go across, and you can then go down here and choose a plethora of options. I like the proper cheese grater one because it really just helps a lot. You could also apply it in the viewfinder and not on the back screen, but I just have it running the whole way through it. You've also got some peaking settings here that you can tweak as well. So generally, I will have the highlights on high because I really want to be able to see them when they happen. And again, red is probably the best option for me, but again, you've got a few different options you can go for. But red is the one that I stick with. And out the box on the newer cameras is all set to that. Okay, so let's work our way up to A1. So this is where we need to set up some of our focusing options. And the first one you'll have to do if you're using an EM1 Mark III or an X, you won't have to do this on the some of the older models, but you will have to switch on the manual override. So just go from off to on, and suddenly I'm able to tweak wherever I like on that lens whenever I'm holding it. The next option down from it is our back button focus. So again, that AEL/AFL, which traditionally in the old school days would be a lock of exposure and even a lock of focus as well if you wanted it to. But you'd lock your exposure, then recompose. Again, it's not necessary anymore, I would say, with digital photography. So I'd rather use it for focusing. So instead of pressing the front shutter button halfway down to focus, you'll be doing all of it via your thumb at the back. So we'll click into there. So traditionally, you will be set on mode 1. All I want you to do is go in and change it to mode 3. And as you can see, as I move through these options, it goes from locking the exposure to now doing SAF, which is my focusing options. So my focusing is done at the front. At the back, halfway pressing, it will lock the exposure, and then full press, it will take the picture. Continuous AF, again, I would change this as well at the same time, because it means if you move to continuous AF, you won't have that awful moment where the functions are on different buttons. So again, mode 3 or 4 will work very nicely for this. I'll go for mode 4. So we're all on theory on back button now. The next really important step is to make the halfway press, which is your traditional way of shooting, inoperative. So operative means that you can halfway press and do back button at the same time. I don't find that overly helpful, but it's nice to have the option. So I would then put inoperative on this one. So now we're ready to do that end of it. The next thing I generally adjust would be things like continuous sensitivity. So if I did flick to continuous AF, I always have it on +2, which is the most bitey, particularly for small birds. That works really nicely. Okay, so I think we're pretty much ready now to try and shoot some macro. So let me come out of my super control panel in a moment. Oh, sorry, my main menu, and I'm going to show you what we've got set up here. So I'm just going to have to flick back the lever to give myself a bit of distance, and let's try and focus this. So I'm going to press back button. So this is my little setup I've got set up for today. Very simple setup, and again, all I'm using is a bit of natural light from outside over this direction, and I've just got a couple, one of these lovely little lights here, just illuminating it plugged into the main. So dead easy stuff. So using my back button, I'm going to come into here and focus. So with my lever pulled back, this is the closest I'm going to get. So it isn't really close enough for what we're after. If I'm even a bit closer, yeah, I'm not focusing. So what I need to do now is push my lever all the way forwards, and bring it in. I can then come all the way into here. There we go, and it's jumped into focus there. I could then come a bit closer if I wanted to, and there. And now if I want to, I've now pressed my peaking button, and I'm now going to move around a little bit just so you can see, hopefully, the peaking coming in. There we go, you can see it happening in the top corner there. I can see it on the balls there, and I can see it, there we go, coming into the main detail of the jewelry now. So if I just press that, there we go, we're nice and close and in focus. I'm now going to press also my magnifying button. Apologies for the shake. 1 second, I'm just going to bring in my, okay, and then I can zoom right in here, and I'm now going to press my peaking, and I'm now going to focus. Let's bring it in. There we go, lovely. So you can see how close that is, and then you can just jump back out. So it's ideal for checking pupils and all sorts of things. So now let's take a shot. I'm just going to come in a little bit closer, press my focus, 1, 2, 3, and it was that easy. What I'm going to do now is press playback, and as you can see, nice and sharp. And when I come in, I've got a lovely level of detail in this. It's good for detail, obviously. I probably wouldn't overly crop too much on a standard shooting mode like this. And this is where my next part of the demonstration comes in, which is high resolution mode. So on this camera, it will take up to 16 shots, compress them all together, and give you a far higher resolution, basically about 1/3 more resolution. But it also does wonders for noise and all sorts, because it has a few goes at sort of layering the image. It really does perform very well using the macro lens and the high res. And it means you then have the options to be able to crop really tight and make that bug look incredibly close without using extension tubes. Okay, so let's try that setting. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to come out of there and press my OK to bring up my super control panel and go over to my drive menu. This is where my options for high res are. All I have to do is scroll all the way through the H's and the L settings, the timers, and then you get to your high res mode. If I press info, I've then got the option to go tripod or handheld. So tripod will be for every other model other than this and the X. Handheld will obviously be the mode that I'm going to go for now. And I'm going to do a 50 megapixel high res handheld JPEG, but you can also do a 25 if you want to. You can also do a RAW and a JPEG at the same time as well. I'm just going with the JPEG just for ease and speed while showing you guys. Okay, so let's have a go. So I'm just going to spin back round. And I'm going to choose something slightly different within my setup. So here, I've got the back of a watch that I bought in Winchester. I love these little pins. They're very, very cool kind of look to them, especially with a little bit of cold lighting. It looks wonderful. So I'm just going to bring it into focus there. 1, 2, 3, and actually I'm just going to come over a tiny bit for the smaller bits. 1, 2, 3, and there we go. So it's just building the picture for us. And let's hope there isn't too much shake in that from me not having breakfast. And again, this is where the Olympus comes into its own. With the sort of 7 to 7.5 stop stabilization, it's absolutely mind-blowing how far you can handheld these things. Okay, so here's our picky. So this is the whole shot, and I'm going to jump in a little bit. Let's find a nice spot. So where does it look pretty good? It's looking pretty good sort of here, isn't it? Oh my word, look at that. So you can see where sort of it's been corroding in my bag or with my other bits, like nature's taking it over. But as you can see, you can even see the craftsmanship here. You can see the scratches in the cogs. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty incredible, really. So I'm just going to come back and just give you a full idea of the appreciation of that. And it gives it a lovely kind of look. It means I can crop right in. And again, if we were dealing with bugs, etc., you'd be able to get right in on the eyes and it will look absolutely fantastic. Okay, so the next option I want to show you is the in-camera stacking. So because of the HDMI output, I'm not able to show you this live in because of the output. So I have taken a few screen grabs to show you. So give me 1 minute. And I'm just going to share the screen and we will go from there. So 1 second, I just need to move a few bits around. Okay, so let's press share screen and let's go back to the PowerPoint. Brilliant. Okay. Oh, click on it, come back to life. Wonderful. Okay, so what you need to do is to get to your stacking, and stacking is a little bit complicated. It's a bit convoluted in the menu. It's one of the hard ones. There's several pages of options, so it is quite tricky to make sure that it's on and off. It's a really good one, actually, once you've set up to stick on a custom dial. With your EM1s and your EM1 Mark IIs, you've got, you know, what, 4 options to stick that onto. On your EM5 Mark III, you've got 1 option, a custom setting. Again, a really good use for that on the dial. Okay, press menu, come to camera 2. I then want you to go to bracketing. So bracketing is where all of these cool options are kept. Shooting menu 2 has some nice options to play around with. Multiple exposure, keystone compensation. So if your buildings, when you're doing architecture, look like they're falling over, you can compensate in the camera. And there's a few tweaks you can do to high res. And obviously in this camera, you also have live ND feature as well. So that's quite nice. So some of the more creative stuff is definitely stored in menu 2. So go into bracketing, you go across, you go all the way down, make sure none of the other bracketings are switched on. So things like exposure bracketing or art bracketing, again, really nice options for when you want to use it. Go down to focus bracketing, go across, go on. You're then into your focus stacking menu. If focus stacking in camera is switched on at the very top option. If you have this off, the second option down will give you up to 999 shots if you want to, but you'd have to stack them afterwards. I want to do it in the camera. It does a great job and it's nice and quick and easy. So go across and put focus stacking on. The next option is set screen or number of shots that you're going to do. When you're starting out, start at around 7 or 8, but with the top end cameras, it will go up to 15, which is again, really nice. And with a bit of experience, you'll have no problem doing it. Right, setting the differential. There's a lot of debate on this one. I'll give you my opinion on it. So if I'm shooting traditional macro and I still want it to look macro, but I want that little bit more depth of field just on that front of the flower, I will go narrow. It will give me all of those shots compressed right up next to where I focused it, and it'll do it either side of the focusing square. But for today, just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to go a bit wider so you can really see a more extreme version of depth of field. In theory, you could do this using a standard, 12 to 100 lens, and you'll get that lovely kind of feel where everything's in focus from right in front of you to infinity. Using the 60mm, it's obviously a lot more subtle. So I'm going to push it right up to wide so you guys really get a good idea of how much it can stretch. So what you then need to do from here is go back going, yes, okay, okay, okay. And when you click into your main, by pressing your shutter into your main shooting mode, you will have BKT written across the top. So that means you're in bracket mode. And you've also got this lovely little gray square around the edging. This is where the crop will be. There's a 10% crop on the image. You will end up with all of the individual shots plus your stack shot. And another thing to be aware of is you'll have a little stack symbol in your playback, and I'll show you that once we've done some. Right, back to the demo. So sadly, I'm not going to be able to give you a full demonstration on this. It just won't show using the HDMI. So I'm going to have to show you a bit and then pull the cable out and show you the results. So give me one moment. So let's stop sharing that and we'll come back to the camera. Brilliant. Okay, so let me just do that. Press menu, go to camera 2. So this is where I'm going to have to pull out. 1 second, guys. Okay. So I'm pressing menu, I'm going to bracketing, I'm going on. I put my focus on, and I'm going to set it to 12 shots, differential of 8, on. And now I'm ready to shoot. So let me just shoot one, and I will plug back in to show you guys the effect. Just coming in nice and close. 1, 2, 3. Brilliant. So I'm just going to plug my camera in. Give me one moment. And I'm just going to shoot one normal shot as well. So we've got a nice contrast as well. So give me a second. And roughly get the same shot. Okay, brilliant. And that's plugged back in. Okay, sorry about the darkness. And now let's bring back the playback. Okay, right. So this is your standard shot at f4. And there's your stack shot. Wow, look at all that background jump in. So this was at an 8 differential. And again, really retains some lovely detail and quality. And if you think of the bugs, it means that you can get the bug, the leaf, and everything all in focus at the same time. So let's normal shot, stack shot. So everything is completely in, even the foreground and the background. My fossil in the background's coming out as well. And if I scroll back, I've now got all the individual shots that it's taken as well. And then you get your stacked one. Phenomenal. Right, let me switch back the feed and we will then do a little bit of Q&A. So give me 1 minute while I switch the feeds round. Hello everyone. Okay, I am back. So any questions? Oh, I've got a couple of questions here already. Give me 1 second. I'll just answer these and then we will have an open forum on it. It's all right, Margaret. Apologies. No problem for you not having connection problems. Like I said, I've recorded all of this so you guys can have a copy to go through at your leisure. Pat, is there any point using RAW for stacking? Not if you're doing the in-camera stacking, to be honest with you. If you're doing the in-camera stacking, yeah, I'd generally just do it on a JPEG because obviously the final result is going to be a JPEG. So I think if you were going to shoot RAW, you probably want to stack it yourself and you wouldn't use the in-camera stacking, basically. Okay, so I've answered those ones. Give me some more questions. Anybody got any more questions?
Yes, I've got another one.
Hello, Pat.
When you flick the dial to 1:1 on the 60mm lens, it just jumps back again. So how do you know how many images it will take using that?
That's a great question. So the 1:1 setting, what you do is obviously what you want to do is you flick it into 1:1, and because you're now in back button, you're trying to focus, you won't refocus by accident and it jump back. So you flick to 1:1 and then you just move to the point where it's in focus as close as you could physically go, and then just press your shutter. And because there's no half press on there, you will be able to shoot at 1:1 without it trying to recompose. Because what's happening predominantly there, if it doesn't get it first time, it will hunt and then jump back, basically. So you flick 1:1, you can see it on the top here that it's in 1:1, and you just move nice and close to it. You can then press your peaking if you want to, because my eyes are a bit shot for this sort of stuff. And again, you'll hit that sweet spot and you go, right, this is as close as I can. But a lot of the time, the 1:1 will be too close. It's great for like really close up work, but a lot of the time you want a bit of context in your macro. So yeah, you jump in, get as close as you can, take that shot. And then again, if you refocus using your back button and then move back and recompose.
What happens if you don't use the back button?
Yeah, so yeah, if you're not going to hit the back button, what I would do is I'd put it into fully manual. So again, just go, okay, jump to your super control panel and just go to fully manual. And then when you flick 1:1, when you press halfway down here, it's not going to try and focus.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's a couple of ways around it. I like the back button process just because I got used to it using it in wildlife. I kind of reprogrammed my brain into it. You know, I spent 20 years using half press, and then, you know, only in recent years have I, you know, started using the back button. I would suggest it's great, but yeah, you can definitely just go to manual if you want to.
I tried back button and I couldn't get on with it at all. So.
Well, it's reprogramming and in the brain, isn't it? It's hard work. I totally understand.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Okay, any more questions?
Yeah. I always find the lever quite tough.
Quite tough.
It does move, but it's not. Yeah,
it is. You're right. It is quite a tough thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got little grooves in it. I really do it with my nail. Always make sure you got a bit of nail on one.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is a bit. I don't think you got an odd one there. It is quite a firm kind of pull.
Yes.
I suspect it's gone with that, just in case you got your hands all over here and you just kind of pull it back by accident, I would guess.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Brilliant. Any more questions?
When you were doing the flowers, on what part of the flower are you focusing? Right in the centre or at the side?
Yeah, I mean, generally, so if I'm doing stacking, I'll go a little bit closer to me. So if it, you know, the shot I was showing you where the flower's slightly to the side, I wouldn't go for the head. I'd go for the stuff that's slightly closer to me. Because generally with f-stops, there's, you know, let's say 5.6, it's, okay, let's say this is here and, you know, I shoot at 5.6 and the depth of field is this. It's always a bias to the background, I find, more than the foreground. So there's always a bit of a shift. So I'll generally go a bit further forward because I know that the background's kind of going to pop in later on. But yeah, if I was shooting something face on, yeah, I'd go with the front of the flower, absolutely. Go for your main subject matter still that you would normally, but then just remember you're going to get a bit both sides of it with the stacking. Wonderful.
Just got a quick question. If you're stacking, shooting in JPEG, if you wanted to do a bit of post-processing, you'd be a bit stuck, would you? Because it gives you more to play with in RAW than it does in JPEG.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, yeah, RAW, the file size is 5 times the size. There's more color depth to it. JPEG has been compressed. You're absolutely correct there. So factually, yes, totally correct. But I'll give it a bit of a caveat. The quality of JPEGs now is pretty mind-blowing. I mean, I'll be honest with you, with a lot of stuff, I just shoot JPEGs because I can tweak the saturation, the color, I can pull my highlights right down, my shadows down, again, all in the Super Control Panel as I go. So yeah, if you're doing a stack, you are going to have less editing options, but I'm really old school. I used to hand print color and black and white. All I'll ever do is I'll pull my highlight down a pinch, I will maybe saturate it just a pinch, and I'll just dodge and burn a few bits in. There is enough to, I find, to do that. And again, when you're shooting with a mirrorless camera, you can see everything in the eyepiece. So if I take a picture and go, well, that's way out burnt, I'll just stop it down a bit, or I'll pull those highlights down in that grid. So you can tweak it in the camera to get it really sweet. So I will say yes and no to that one.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Anybody else?
Jez, it's Alan.
Hello, Alan.
Just referring back to what you were saying about the 30mm lens. I took it out a couple of times during the summer, and yeah, it's a wonderful change as a walk around lens. It gives you such flexibility on just the one package. So yeah.
No, it's a great little lens, and it's cheap as chips as well, actually. Yeah, it's a great little option, and it will also do the stacking as well, which I think is the cheapest lens that we do that stacks. I mean, all our pro lenses do, but this one I think is a bargain if it stacks as well. I know if I suddenly lost my bootloader kit tomorrow and I had to buy everything, which would be terrifying, I'd buy one of these in a heartbeat, absolutely, just for the options of getting in nice and close for all sorts of things. I think this one actually sells really well with people that do their stuff for Etsy and stuff like that, where you just want to get nice close-ups of things, you know, detailed shots of things you'd stitched or paintings or whatever it is that you want. It's nice to be able to just get that bit closer. But most of our lenses get really close due to the chip size. Your 12 to 100, your 1240 will go to 1 centimeter, but they will be uber wide. It won't have that lovely compressed aesthetic that we love in macro. So yeah, you've got a bit of options there. Okay, any more questions?
I've just thought of something.
Yeah,
follow up to what I was asking before. The fact that the little wheel flips back again once you've turned it. Once you've taken one photograph, does it revert then back to one of the other settings?
No.
Does it stay on?
No,
does it stay on 1:1 till you change
so if you
it again?
flick it into 1:1 and you were in manual, let's say, it will just stay there. It won't move, and you could just do, you know, if you had it set up, I don't know, let's say I'm photographing small coins all day. Let's say I'm a metal detector, and I could have this set up on a tripod. I've got it 1:1. Everything's, you know, there's distances about that, and I could just have it all day there, and I know that everything's in focus. I could press my peaking as and when I wanted, and every single one of those you could just click all day through it. So yeah, you can do that. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, have a play with it. You could always, if you wanted to, what some people do is they'll put manual focus as an option either on the lever or on one of the buttons again. So you could just click to manual. It's a shame this doesn't have a pull ring, really. It'd be lovely if it did. There's obviously other, if you look on our roadmap, there's obviously another macro lens coming as well. No details on it. But yeah, that again, I think would be even more pro option coming, which would be fantastic. I can't wait for that. Okay, any more questions? Brilliant. Thank you so much. Those questions were great. It's a really nice interactive group today. I've really enjoyed this. And on behalf of Olympus, I'd just like to say thank you for joining us today and being part of our lovely little community. And stay safe, everyone. And one day, hopefully, probably next summer, I'll look forward to seeing you all in person, and you can come and we can look at pictures and we can discuss best practice. But until then, stay safe, everyone. And I look forward to seeing you soon.
Many thanks, Jez. Thank you.
My pleasure. Bye, everyone.